Hello and welcome. This video will be a review on the upcoming debut banner, Morpho. As usual, I will not be recommending new players to pull any debut banners until they have accumulated the core weapons for their main class or job. So if you have recently started playing, more efficient to spend your seed crystals on Dragonkin banners, as they have 2x rates, so 20% rates of 4 stars, and they're job focused, which means it's a lot easier to build up your grids. If you miss Dragon, Heaven's Ocean banners and Startdash Gacha are also a consideration, so this is especially if you're unsure what class you'd like to play. Do note that these are both quite diluted, as they contain all the weapons from every class. With that being said, let's get started. So first up we have Morpho Rod. This is a water element battle axe, and it deals large physical damage to a single target. It also has the Dauntless ability, which all axes have, and for this one it's a Swordsman axe, as it removes physical or magical damage taken up debuffs on yourself, up to 2 of them. So the reason we know this for Swordsman, it's because all of our B buff swords, such as Remel and Crystal Eater as the basic examples, they give us these B and A physical magical damage taken up debuffs. Okay, and so once it removes the debuffs, or the self debuffs, it will then have extra abilities. The first is it will deal extreme damage to the foe. It will then apply guts to yourself, 1 stack of guts, and it will also give us our RT axe buffs, or physical and magical damage dealt buffs. So these are good for buffing our dual blades, and if you have an extender like Lucius, you can also extend these buffs until your greatsword nuke at the end of your rotation. So the reason this axe is good is because of the guts it applies to yourself. So how guts works is, the first time you receive lethal damage while under the effects of guts, at least 1 stack, your health will be reduced to 1 and a stack of guts will get removed. So it's almost, you can think of it almost like a second life. And the reason this is good is it combos with later greatswords, and it's good if you want to build a durable swordsman. So the sword in question is Ragnarok Sword. So basically it applies a damage barrier to yourself if you are under the effects of guts or a damage barrier, and applies 4 of these. So it makes you quite durable. So how it would work with this build is you'd use your buff sword, then you use Morpho Axe to clear the debuffs on yourself, and then you would have Ragnarok Sword to use immediately after to give extra damage barrier buffs. And another sword that would go with this durable combo is Ibis. Some people use this to decent effect, especially in solo battles. If you can't find teammates to battle with you, it gives you a 100% health buff. So yeah, if you're building a durable swordsman, Morpho is quite a good pull to go for. For free-to-play swordsman, I don't recommend pulling this, as they should aim instead for Lucius, which is a K buffer, as well as an axe buff extender, Gloria, which is a 2-in-1 physical damage B and critical rate A backline buffer, so this is really good, and also Ostroblade, which is the first FA massive dark greatsword. So out of these 3, I recommend probably Gloria the most, and then Lucius and Ostro. So besides swordsmen, guardians can also use Morpho Rod, but it's quite situational. There are certain battles where you may have damage debuffs on yourself, and you can use an axe like Morpho to remove these. Also nice because it applies the guts if you have 2 of them. So some battles would include Gaiamaton and Leonkus. But as far as guard weapons go, it is not a recommended pull. It's just something situational which you can use. So free-to-play guards, I would not recommend pulling this. Okay, so next up we have Morpho Spear. So this is a water element spear, and it deals massive special guardian magic damage to a foe. So this damage is dependent on the higher of your magic defense or physical defense. So whichever of those 2 stats is higher, the damage will be based off of that. It also heals you for a medium amount based on your max health. It applies a recovery, HP and action recovery self buff for 25 seconds. This means that every time you cast a weapon, you are going to heal an amount of health. This buff is dependent on your magic attack. There's also a LA HP recovery debuff, 30%, which is quite big. And finally, inverted scale 2 times and a 0.7% 0.7 times hate multiplier. This means you're going to obtain 70% hate that you normally would, depending on the damage you deal with this spear. So the inverted scales is guaranteed for guardians, as that's part of their job skill. However, for clerics, this is not too big of an issue, as you're rarely going to get this. As far as spears go, it isn't super great. And the reason for that is the long duration ally HP recovery down. This means that for any heals you give, either to allies or to yourself, are going to be reduced by 30%. So this is really bad for clerics, as they need to be healing a large amount. And for guardians, it can be detrimental to their self-heals. However, it's not going to affect the healing that they receive from, for example, clerics. Now, a possible use I see for this weapon is some meme kind of solo builds, either as guardian or maybe as cleric, where you want to be having the HP recovery on action buff to keep you going as you deal damage with other abilities. And the heal is also quite nice, and it's a massive nuke weapon as well. But for the general player base, I wouldn't recommend pulling this spear either as a cleric or as a guard. Okay, now we have Morpho Wand. This is a single target revive mace. So with regular class, it will revive an ally with 1 HP with a low probability. So this I think was 10% probability, and then it recovers HP dependent on your magic defense, a large amount. So it has a chance to revive an ally. However, it can also be used as a regular large single target heal, which is not too bad. And if it does revive someone, and this revive is guaranteed when you DK it, it will also apply guts to the target while giving you a magic damage dealt down debuff. So debuff doesn't matter too much, because as a cleric, you're not going to be the one doing much magic damage. The guts is actually really good, because it means that if you revive an ally and then give them guts, it's possible that they can survive an instant death move, or if you happen to poorly time your revive, for example, you revive an ally just as a raid buster or a front cleave is used, or back cleave is used, it will stop them from instantly dying with the guts. And just having a stack of guts on an ally can increase their survivability for the rest of the battle as well. So yeah, a pretty good mace overall, especially if you're missing a single target revive. I would definitely recommend grabbing this up. And for clerics that want to be building a mono water grid, so just a water grid maces, this is also a pretty nice pull. If you already have a single target revive mace, and if you're not building a water grid, then you can skip this if you want. Moving on, we have Morpho Wing. So this is a front row targeting dual blade. So basically, it will hit all front row enemies. If there are no front row enemies, or the front row is entirely dead, then it will target the back row, the entire back row. What this dual blade offers is B and A, so physical and magic damage taken up debuffs to the enemies it hits. And these are 10% each. It also gives a 20% fire resistance self buff and a 20% earth damage resistance self debuff. So good when we're going against fire enemies, which you should be with water dual blades, and bad against earth enemies, because water is weak to earth. It also has a 0.3 times hate multiplier, which means you're only going to be grabbing 30% hate with this weapon, which is good, because if you hit multiple enemies, it's possible to get quite a bit of hate. As far as dual blades go, this is not the best for Swordsman as a DPS weapon, because it only has 3 medium hits and 1 large hit compared to single target dual blades. So we just look at Griff Edge here. It has 4 medium and 1 large, so it's missing 1 hit compared to single target dual blades. It also is limited in targeting, so you can only target the front row. If there's a back row boss that you want to be killing first, you won't be able to with this weapon. So yeah, for Swordsman, I wouldn't recommend focusing it, but if you are going for the Morpho Battle Axe as a main pull, then it's possible you may pick this up along the way, and you could use it in a water grid if that happens. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend aiming for this. For archers, they have a lot better options for B and A debuffs. So if we take a look at their bows, we have Inferno Pelter, which gives 20% of the same debuffs to all enemies. And we also have Blue Comet Shooter, and this gives 30% of the same debuffs to the front row as well. So yeah, a lot better options already. I would not recommend archers pulling for Morpho Wing, especially free to play. So now we've come to Morpho Rod, the main reason people are pulling on this banner. So it's a mage buff staff, and it gives 3 D, N, and O 5% magic damage dealt buffs for a long duration, 40 seconds. It also gives you a critical rate self buff, which is 40%, so pretty big. And it deals large damage to yourself and gives you a large Dragonkin Gorge increase. So this is a 30% increase to your Gorge. The reason why this stuff is so good is because it extends 3 buffs for a long duration, which I'll show later, and because of the 40% critical rate buff. So this buff here means that if you're using Startdash dice as a crit buffer, so see Startdash dice has a 50% crit rate. When you have 40% from Morpho plus 50% from Startdash dice, a 5% base crit, and then you only need to get 5% more crit from your armor and accessory passives. And that's not too far-fetched. You can pretty much have 100% crit rate with Startdash dice and Morpho, as well as dice variants. And these include Ignim Proof of Loyalty, which is a fire equivalent, and the Great Mountain Goat Mask, which is an earth equivalent. And that's from the Cornu banner. So this staff means that mages no longer need to gamble crits when they're using dice or equivalents. Some mages were actually extending fortune cards with dice so that they have a 100% crit rate, but you don't need to actually extend your rotation once you have Morpho. So it actually gives you a bit of stability in that you're going to be critting every or most of the time if you don't have that 5% from gear. Morpho becomes a lot better later on when we get Morpho Rod. So this is a 120 staff. The 120 staffs basically give 120% magic damage buffs. So we see here 3 buffs, 40% each, that's 120%. And we see it also has the same letters D, N, and O. This staff, the buff only lasts 7.9 seconds. So pretty much the start of the battle, you'd use this, and then you'd use Morpho to extend these buffs the entire duration. The only thing you will need to watch out for when you're using Morpho is the large self-damage. So just watch that you aren't in a low health range to actually knock yourself out with this, as I have seen people do that with Atos already, and that has medium self-damage. So yeah, Morpho is going to be doing a bit more damage to yourself. That's the only thing mages will have to worry about. All in all, a really good staff, which will only get better in the future. I highly recommend mages pulling for this, including free-to-play. Now we have Morpho Reaper. So this is a water element AoE scythe, AoE damage scythe. It does large damage to all foes. It gives you a magic damage self buff for 20% value with the D letter, and then the regular crit power and Dragonkin Gorge increase, which all rainbow scythes give. So compared to debuff scythes and crit power scythes, this scythe falls behind in its offensive potential, similar to Galtor scythe in the last banner review. So for mages, I wouldn't recommend aiming for this. However, mages might pick this up. If they're going for Morpho Rod, they may pick this up alongside it. And if you do that, you could use Morpho Reaper as a water stat stick. For clerics, this basically offers no utility at all, so I wouldn't recommend clerics pulling for this either. Finally, we have Aqua. So this is the magic device in the banner. And this is a front row, so it moves to the front. Magic device that deals massive magic damage based on your physical defense. So that means that archers or support archers and guardians will be able to do the most damage with this device, and it applies a 10% water damage resistance debuff to a single target. So a pretty good debuff device for support classes, especially guardians and archers, because they benefit from the physical defense base damage. But clerics could also use it too in battles where you need to output a lot of damage faster. So for example, bosses with enraged mechanics, or in score attack battles. It's a situational weapon that is extremely good in fire boss battles. However, free-to-play players may not want to aim just for this weapon. That wraps up the Morpho banner review. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next video.